Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And the ongoing questions on whether or not Microsoft can get the Activision Blizzard acquisition through regulations continues on. But we did get an update today as Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella spoke out about what he thinks will happen next, and let's just say that he is feeling very, and I mean very, confident. And well, interestingly enough, the thing about all of this is, it's as I've been saying all along, it's Sony's past actions that's giving him this utmost confidence. So yeah, we're going to dive into that a little later on today, as well as more speculation of a Nintendo Switch 2 or a possible Switch Pro, as you will. Yeah, those rumors are just always rolling, so I'll give you all the latest on that. Per usual though, just a little reminder of those buttons below. If you like gaming and if you like gaming news, then you're gonna want to hit those buttons below. Like, subscribe, and hit that not so shiny bell. Let's just go and get right into things though, starting off with Rise of the Ronin. This is that Team Ninja game that was announced last week at PlayStation State of Play, and it's been grabbing a lot of attention online, and rightfully so in my opinion. I think it looks excellent so far, and because this is a Team Ninja game, I mean, they've made some great games in the past, like Nioh and Ninja Gaiden as an example, so you do have the talent here to pair with its really strong trailer. It's easy to see why there's a lot of hype for this one. But one thing about Rise of the Ronin is that there has been some discussion about its PlayStation exclusivity. This was announced as a PlayStation exclusive, but is this a time deal like we've seen with various other third-party studios, or is this a little bit more permanent than just that? Well, in the opening of the trailer, it does clearly list it as a Sony Interactive Entertainment game, which means that they are publishing it themselves. But if you were still skeptical about any of this, we do in fact have further confirmation now. It's been made official. Sony's XDev studio is indeed collaborating with Team Ninja on Rise of the Ronin. Now, if you don't know who Sony XDev is, they collaborate with independent studios to publish content for PlayStation. This includes games like Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, Heavenly Sword, and the list just goes on and on. So if there were any questions before about Rise of the Ronin's exclusivity, this is a long-term thing, as Sony's not only publishing it, but they are also involved in its development as well. Also, we got a pretty cool new feature as a part of that September Xbox update. Now, this update was already looking pretty good, as they're looking to revamp its library, giving you easier access to your games and apps. There's also new storage and default install options, which is nice to see, but now it also includes more customization options for the Xbox Elite Series 2 controller. If you have one of those controllers or are planning to purchase one, they are giving you a little bit of extra value here, allowing you to take advantage of its RGB backlit logo. As you can see here, you'll now be able to change its color to pretty much anything that you want to. It does have some preset colors chosen for you, but you can also play around with its hue and saturation, making it really just completely your own, and a lot of these look pretty cool in my opinion. I do like the various colors that they're kind of showing here, but really anytime that you have more control and just more options at your disposal, that's always a good thing for consumers. But like I said before, the September update is looking to be a good one overall for Xbox fans out there, and they did start to roll it out yesterday, so do keep an eye out for that. Now, I will say for myself personally, I do like what Team Xbox is doing here. They're continuously trying to improve that user experience. They're giving fans more options. But at the same time, I don't want them to slow down either. There's still some fan-requested features out there that I would love to see. I would just absolutely be thrilled if they would add an Xbox Platinum equivalent achievement. I would love to see that, so I do hope that they just continue to push forward as much as they possibly can. But it is really nice when you get these updates here that clearly improves the user experience. Let's go and move on over to the big stuff though, because there's a lot to go over here. Obviously, over the last month or so, the Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition has really started to heat up, with various reports making their way online. Now, I always like to be clear about this, but all this scrutiny that we're seeing from regulators is completely expected. The FTC, they've been in the second phase of their investigation for a while, and now we have the CMA over in the UK. They followed suit, and they are heading to phase 2 as well, and we'll likely see this from most regulators. What wasn't really expected though was how public the CMA made their second phase of the investigation. I'd actually go so far to say that their tweet was a little unprofessional with the emojis and just kind of making it into a bigger scene than it needed to be. No other regulator has gone in that direction, so it was definitely weird to say the least. But this prompted Sony to publicly talk about their displeasure in the acquisition, especially in regards to the future of Call of Duty. So now you do have this very public dispute going on between Sony, Microsoft, and these regulators. At the very least, it's clear that Sony, they do not want this deal to go through, as they're whining about all this, which has always been a little ironic considering the history of Sony. We'll get more into that here in just a second. But first, let's dive into the meat of this topic, because Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella has now responded, and check this statement out. In an interview with Bloomberg, he went on to say, and I quote, "In gaming, we have one goal, which is to bring more games to more gamers on all platforms and provide more choice for publishers everywhere and developers everywhere. So everything that we're doing with our content, our subscriptions, our cloud, and community really is about driving that choice and opportunity. So we feel very confident. Of course, any acquisition of this size will go through scrutiny, but we feel very, very confident that will come out. You know, we're number 4, number 5, depending on how you count in gaming. In fact, the number 1 player, Sony, I think even in this period has acquired 3 companies. So if this is about competition, let us have competition." And it's really just that last line there that is just so telling. It's almost like he just dropped the gauntlet here and speaks to what I've been pretty much saying all along. On one side, and you're even seeing it here in this very specific statement, Microsoft is going to play nice guy and say we have no intentions to take Call of Duty off of PlayStation. And what we're really trying to do is reach even more gamers, because we aren't just consoles. We're PC and we're mobile through things like the cloud. We want to reach those billion-plus gamers that we talk about so often. What we don't want to do, though, is take games away from other platforms, including our competitors. This is something that they have remained committed to. However, looking beyond the exclusivity debate between Sony and Microsoft, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Despite what Sony is trying to lead these regulators to believe, there's evidence out there against them. And Microsoft, you know, this is a very big and very smart company. They know this. They're going to use this stuff against Sony. It's kind of like Sony has been poking this bear for years and years. And while it was only Xbox at the time, they could just kind of do this stuff without repercussion. But it's no longer Xbox. You have to separate that from Microsoft, the company themselves, because Microsoft, the company, is now fully backing the Xbox division. So now this bear has a lot more bite to it. And that's where we are now. So this is kind of why Sony has put themselves in a predicament, because Microsoft is going to show that Sony has been doing very similar things for years and years, despite being the market leader. That is a leading argument for Microsoft right now. They are not the market leader here. That is actually Sony. But even then, Microsoft's argument is that Sony goes out and they buy these exclusive contracts or lock down beloved IPs such as Final Fantasy, such as Street Fighter, and really even with Spider-Man. They're also going to point out that they too have been acquiring studios, as he very much did here. And see, that's one of the things about Microsoft acquiring studios. I do often see people within the community kind of throw shade at Microsoft for acquiring studios, and this happened even before they started targeting publishers like Bethesda and Activision. This type of stuff happened even when they were picking up studios like Ninja Theory and Double Fine as an example. And okay, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, then you might want to understand the history of PlayStation, because that is important to this topic, important to this specific Activision Blizzard deal. And actually, let's do that. Let's take a look at the history of PlayStation when it comes to acquisitions to kind of show you what I'm talking about here. So Sony, they own 22 studios as of today, 14 of which they acquired. In fact, most of their big players are acquired studios. So let's just kind of go down the list here and show you what I'm talking about. So you have Sony Bend Studio. That was acquired. Blue Point Games, they were acquired. Fabric Games, they were acquired. Firesprite, well, they acquired them as well. Guerrilla Games, that's another acquired studio. Haven Studios, acquired. Housemarque, they were acquired. Insomniac Games, they were acquired. Media Molecule, they were acquired. Naughty Dog, the beloved Naughty Dog, that is another acquisition. Nixus Software, they were acquired. Savage Game Studios, that's a new acquisition. Sucker Punch Productions, that's another really beloved studio. Well, guess what? They were also acquired. And then you have Valkyrie Entertainment, they were too acquired. Oh, and I forgot Bungie, they're also another studio acquisition, so we're up to 15 acquisitions now. So yeah, I mean, you can clearly see here Sony's no strangers to studio acquisitions. The main difference in this situation is that Microsoft is now operating on a more grand scale, but that in its own is not necessarily against regulations. Now, I've said it before, and I'll just kind of say it again. These regulators do not have to like buyouts like this, but they still have to abide by the rules. It will obviously face a lot of scrutiny, as it should. It's a nearly $70 billion acquisition, and we'll surely see a lot of back and forth happen between now and if and when it gets complete. But the question remains, is this anti-competitive? And I think Microsoft has a lot of evidence to show that it isn't. At the very least, they have legitimate arguments that they can work with, and even if these regulators don't like it, because Microsoft has good, solid arguments, this is something that they could use in the court of law if they had to, and this is something that regulators don't want to deal with. And that's something that, yes, they do have to keep in mind. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Sony kind of did a lot of this to themselves because they've been doing some very similar things really since the inception of the PlayStation brand. Now, again, maybe at a smaller scale, and Sony, they'll definitely work with that. And yeah, I mean, there's really just this whole back and forth between Sony and Microsoft now. They're really going to kind of use whatever they can at their disposal, and we're even seeing Microsoft's CEO get involved by pointing out Sony's leading position and their acquisitions. So as always, I guess we'll just have to kind of see how all of this plays out, but let me know what you all think about this. Do you think Microsoft has a point here or not? Now, we do have an interesting Nintendo story as well, as rumors of a Switch Pro or a Switch Successor is making the rounds once again, because why not? So what's happening here is that over on Reddit, it's been spotted that an NVIDIA employee has confirmed the existence of a Tegra 239 chip, which is actually the same chip that's been rumored since 2021 that's supposedly being developed for the next generation Switch. You can see this confirmation in a comment that can be accessed on linux.org, where it says, adding support for Tegra 239 SoC, which has 8 cores in a single cluster. Also moving number clusters to SoC data to avoid over-allocating memory for 4 clusters always. So if you kind of look through this document, it's not going to mean a lot to a lot of different people, but this whole thing has brought up a lot of discussion on whether or not this chip is linked to this next Nintendo Switch. And because we are seeing some type of confirmation of its existence made here, and because it's seeing some movement, does that mean the Switch could be coming soon with this chip? And well, actually, it's kind of hard to say one way or the other. While this could be Switch related, it could also be related to an NVIDIA Shield, as an example. They do also use their Tegra chips for those, so this very much could be for a new NVIDIA Shield tablet, as an example. Like I said, though, regardless if this is related to the Switch or if it's related to a new Shield tablet, something interesting is indeed happening here, because it very much does confirm the existence of the Tegra 239 chip in some shape or form. Now, this is actually very notable and where things start to get really interesting. If you remember right, according to a leak back in 2021, it was claimed that Nintendo will use a customized T234 chip dubbed, you might have guessed it here, the T239. And this is exactly why its confirmation is creating just so much speculation online. So that's either a very, very interesting coincidence, or there could be some truth to that original leak. At the very least, while I don't think that any of this is any kind of definitive proof of the next Switch or anything like that, I think that this is worth paying attention to, because if that T239 chip really is a part of the Switch, then that's notable because it could give us a clue as to what to expect. As the original Reddit post pointed out, this gives us some new details, as I'll just go ahead and read here. As of this leak, we now know the following details about the next Nintendo Switch console. It has a T239 SoC, as we've been talking about. It has an 8-core CPU, likely to be ARM Cortex. It might be an Ampere-based GPU that may incorporate some Lovelace features. And then the second generation Nintendo Switch graphics API contains references of DLSS 2.2 and ray tracing support. Now, I don't know about the whole ray tracing support, but DLSS alone would be a massive improvement for the Switch. But again, this is very much the reason that it is definitely worth paying attention to this leak, because we do have these loose details here if the two are tied together. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, with how games are distributed today, does the future of game preservation concern you? And as you can see here, yes, most of you all very much are concerned, with 62% of you saying yes, while 31% 100% of you said no. Now, I completely understand where you're all coming from, and this is whether you buy your games physically or if you buy them digitally. Now, physical games, they do add a little extra security, but by no means are they necessarily perfect either, and the reason for that is because the way games are shipped today. It's actually very rare for games to come 100% complete on discs anymore. In some cases, like with Halo Infinite or Forza Horizon 5, or even with Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I believe all of those games, they do not come complete on disc or anywhere close to it. There are major parts of those games that you have to download, and then that's just kind of scratching the surface, because when it comes to day one updates, that's so common with today's games. As an example, let's kind of take a look at something like Cyberpunk 2077. So 30 years from now, maybe you want to pop in your disc of Cyberpunk 2077, and well, if you were to do that, and if you did not download its update, that means that you're going to get those day one bugs and those issues that plagued so many people out there. As we know, it's now a vastly different game with various updates post-launch. Then to look beyond that, I mean, when it comes to something like Xbox and things like smart delivery, now that's a great feature and everything, but in terms of preservation, from what I've seen, it's actually the Xbox One version that's on the disc. On top of that, you have to consider things like DRM and online checks. So honestly, I don't really think that any of the big three does things just absolutely perfectly. And I think that there is a legitimate reason to ask what will happen years and years from now if they ever do take their servers offline. I mean, I guess fans will just have to invest in very large storage drives to keep all their games on. And then they might even have to make backups as well. All in all, though, I mean, a lot of things can change in the future, and we don't really know how all of this will actually play out. But as you can see from the results here, that concern is a very real thing. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.